Hello.
Hi, Philip. How are you?
Still there? Hello?
Yeah, I'm here, brother. Can you
Hey,
hear me?
how are you? Thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. I love talking about this stuff. Thank you for having me.
Well, I've literally only done two other episodes of this, so it's not even
Okay,
really a test yet. Um, but
no problem, man.
I'm I'm super interested in what you do, and it's something that I didn't even realize I was so interested in until a couple years ago. I think I found your videos. I found your videos probably like 6 or 7 years ago, something like that.
Hmm. Yeah, yep.
Um, Maybe yeah, around there. And then about 2 or 3 years ago, I rewatched a couple of them, and they not only made more sense, but I just realized that I had been thinking about that kind of stuff because of your videos. So I appreciate
Mm.
it. Um,
Well, I'm happy to hear that, brother. Very
yeah,
happy.
and then when I saw when I rewatched your videos, I realized that you put um, contact information on one of them, and I said, let me take a chance and see if he wants to talk about this. So
Yeah, the sync community is all about open dialogue, and we like to feel like it's a long running conversation. So
okay,
it's all good.
all right. Well, I don't know. Let's just jump into it. What got you started thinking about this, or was it something that you kind of grew up thinking about and found the sync community?
Sure. So I think that most people in the sync community grow up with this sense that they're a little bit different in the way that they think and interpret the world. And
Okay.
most of us can't quite put our finger on what it is. But the sync community gives all of us an outlet to at least share it a little bit with other people. And the best way that I could describe what that different feeling is that you feel like you can't really place yourself in the universe, almost like you're sort of living in a void where there's no real continuum of information in the way that other people seem to experience it. Um, you know, in some ways, it feels like intellectual nihilism, but
Okay.
but it feels like there's a purpose to your nihilism. Whereas in traditional nihilism, it's just sort of empty meaninglessness. But I think we sort of feel like there's a vast nothingness that is somehow also the same thing as everything. So even though it's nihilistically nothing, it's also extremely meaningful, and there's a lot of context there to sort of unravel. And I think that that feeling that you're living in that profound void is what we grow up with. And then when you join the sync community and connect with other people, you start to be able to articulate and put words to those feelings. And that community sort of helps you to come to terms with what you've sort of felt your whole life. That was my experience. And a lot of other sync people feel the same way.
Kind of like joining the circus.
I would say so. Yeah, you grow up feeling like you're a clown or you love animals or whatever it is, and then you find your tribe and they help you express yourself.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a typical finding your tribe kind of moment, but I actually used the circus pretty specifically because I lived with and worked for the Big Apple Circus for a while, and almost everybody who worked for them, that's how they described their childhood to a T. Um,
Mm,
and it wasn't just that they were performers; it wasn't just that they were acrobats or whatever they did that they loved and had passion for. It wasn't that thing that even drew them to working for this kind of thing. It was a feeling that they had
hmm.
growing up that was I think you put it well. Almost like a vast nothingness that is at the same time everything. That's a great way to put it. And
Hmm.
being on stage for these people wasn't necessarily enough. It was the community of the circus that drew them in. The idea that it was almost like the island of misfit toys kind of thing, where it's not necessarily place from the outside that you would want to be, but once you get there, you really you see that you're not alone. That's an interesting feeling to have, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And you obviously, I mean, you play sports for a living. That's something that you can see where the team mentality gets its strength from. By the way, how long have you been playing ball for?
I've played my whole life. I started playing professional when I was 21, and this is my 13th
Nice.
year doing that. So that's my primary life and my career. Sync is
Okay.
very much a side passion.
What's that?
I said sync is very much a side passion for me.
Okay. Uh, Speaking of it being a side passion, is it something that you've kind of only focused on gathering information for yourself and observing as opposed to producing? Because I noticed you haven't put a video out in I think 5 or 6 years, something like that, right?
Yeah, 5 years, right?
Is it something that you just kind of lost interest in, or is it just something that you haven't gotten around to do because of your career?
Well, there's pragmatic reasons behind why I stopped producing, and at the core of it is my career. But more broadly, it's that sync is not something that you dabble in, at least in my experience, and in the sync community, they would echo this. It's something that I believe consumes you,
Okay.
because I think that when you're thinking in terms of synchromysticism, you interpret data in the world very, very differently. You know, your sense data mechanisms for then generating logical conclusions is totally distorted, and that's sort of the goal of sync. So you celebrate those moments when you disintegrate your rigid understandings and your conventional logic interpretations of things. You celebrate when those barriers break down. But the truth is that to live pragmatically in a world where people are not doing that, and particularly in a business career setting where you're competing in a meritocracy, that type of endeavor is sort of dangerous. That's been my finding. I cannot function within a hierarchical structured meritocracy that's dependent on cause and effect evaluation when I'm trying to actively disintegrate my rigid understandings of the world. The two totally clash with each other. So
Sure.
I'm not able to dabble in it. But when I start to go down a sync thread, when I start to develop scripts for new projects, when I start to analyze a specific movie to come up with a 9/11 crazy conspiracy theory, it bleeds over into every other area of my life. And it's an upward spiral that I really love and welcome, but it cannot coexist with my normal life. That might seem a little dramatic, but it's the
No,
truth.
no,
It's really the
that's
truth.
not at all. It sounds like you say, it's an upward spiral, but it's a spiral nonetheless. It's the kind of thing that
Mhm.
I can definitely see that being how it is. I feel the same way with just the one of the first times I watched something from you. I noticed a I noticed a thing. It was I believe it was your video. Um, oh, I forget the exact name. It's about the Wizard of Oz,
Yep.
and what's that video called?
The Stargate of Oz, probably.
Wizard of Oz, yes. Um, I noticed one of the first times I watched it, I noticed one of the similarities between the two worlds that you're comparing. Um, and I was like, oh, he either missed that or he didn't have time in his video for it. But I'm going to start a list of things where that list of other factors that I've noticed. And I realized after just like 10 or 15 minutes, I am either going to do this, like for the next few months, I'm going to do this,
Mm-hmm.
or I can get into it, because it's in 10 minutes or 15 minutes, I was already kind of like aware of how not necessarily addictive that is, but it's something that I do in normal everyday life. But once I, like you said, once you attach yourself to one thing and focus on it, it can definitely not only consume you, but it can be something that you can observe right before you do it and be like, all right, I don't have time for this right now. I don't have energy for this right now. And that was one of those things. The one thing that I noticed in the in the Wizard of Oz when it's at the end of the movie where the wizard, the guy in real life, or quote unquote real life, comes to the window when she's in bed.
Yeah.
And you had a I forget the thing that you mentioned to the window, but he also, when he walks up in front of the window, he's standing. He covers a some kind of either machinery or some kind of wood structure in the background, and it is a wood structure depicting the angle 45. Oh, I'm sorry, 42.
42, yeah.
And it's as I forget it, I don't. It's been so long since I've seen it, but that's what you were referencing. Him coming to the window, being right before it. It was just one of those things where I was like, oh, there's much more in this movie than is already deciphered by this guy. I'm gonna look into this. And again, 10-15 minutes later, I was like, all right, I can't do this. I'm gonna put this off. And I actually can't wait to have time to do that, because I love projects like that where you're focused directly on one thing. It's not something I do very regularly. I usually have 5 or 6 art projects going on, and projects like this where you're just kind of like slowly picking stuff out and realizing stuff. Man, I don't have time for that. I really don't.
Well, one thing we say in sync is that your brain is not what conventional wisdom and science tells us it is. It's not a mechanism for sorting through sense data and interpreting it logically, but rather it's a pragmatic barrier to prevent you from overstimulation from the infinite context that exists in every cubic centimeter of space around you. And that there's infinite context, infinite information everywhere that you could be interpreting, and your brain is preventing all of that from overloading you. So like you said, oh, there's more in this video than even this guy has said. That is the spiral of sync. When you open that door in your mind, you say, I want to get more information out of this little empty void of space, and there's infinite information there. So it's like, where do I stop? Where does this end? And once you open that door, you realize like it's a thing. Like it's not a game that we're playing. Like it's a real thing. Your brain is able to sort of stop filtering out as much information as it does.
Yeah.
And when you open that doorway, it can get out of control a little bit. Like I'm a computer programmer, and so is my brother, and we talk about how when you get into these computer programming phases, your brain starts to work far more logically, and then that bleeds over into every other intellectual endeavor of your life. You can't shut it off. And so it's the same thing with sync.
That's kind of, I mean, that's it makes a lot of sense. That's exactly how I felt when I made that decision to not even go near this project, because I was kind of scared of I realized how much time I was going to need to spend on it, and how much time, not even need to, but I would want to spend on it. And it was in a weird way, not even in a bad, like in a way of like, I don't know, like to use a different example. It's like I wanted to try out for a team, and I just knew I wasn't ready. I wanted to try out one time, and I didn't want to like keep going back and failing. That's how I felt. I felt like, all right, I'm gonna do that, but if I do it right now, it's just gonna not be 100%. It's not gonna be my full attention on it. So,
yep.
It's interesting. The way you describe that reminds me of I don't remember who I heard it from originally. It might have been the artist Alex Gray, or maybe Terrence McKenna. I don't remember. They talked about a representation of imagination and creativity as being your mind is basically a person on a boat on a river, and the water is information and creativity and inspiration. The water is that thing. And when you have a thought, you're dipping a ladle into the water and pouring it into your boat. And it's not like these things are created by you. It's more that they're discovered by you, but they're around you at all times. They're literally the thing holding you up. They're the thing
Mhm.
making you float down this path. And noticing them on a scale of, putting too much into your boat can literally drive you insane, make you sink into the river. But
Mhm.
it reminded me so much of the way you just described that doorway of once you open it, you realize that that barrier, whatever your brain is doing, is pretty effective and pretty intense in its
Mhm.
ability. That's it's kind of wild. So
Mhm.
what have you been looking at recently that's caught your attention, if
I
anything?
do have I do have a number of projects that are half baked. They're Some are Back to the Future based, and I think once I retire from basketball, I'm going to get back on the horse and finish them up. But they're pretty intense, really intense. So
Is
it's
there
not something
anything
I can pick up.
you talk
Yeah.
about, or is it all stuff that you're kind of keeping close to the chest?
One is close to the chest, but a few others I can talk about. So I have a Back to the Future one that relates to Greek mythology that I'm going to redo because there's a whole host of other syncs in there that I've mined and that other people have told me about. Like
Okay.
when you said that you found some ones and you wanted to write me and tell me, that happens to me every day, and I love it. I get
Sure.
so many lists of, the wizard is covering the 42 angle in the background, and then me and that guy will go back and forth about more syncs. And like we said earlier, it's the community that makes it so enjoyable. It's like, you know training the elephants in the circus is fun, but it's really finding your tribe. So a lot of the tribe has sort of contributed to elevating the works that I've already created, and they've maybe doubled the syncs that I made in my original videos. So I kind of want to remake them with those added syncs. And then I have a Back to the Future one that I'm working on that is, I think, will take down the internet, man.
That's the
So
one. I listened to you on the 42-minute podcast. Um,
yeah.
you had mentioned that. I think that was the one you had mentioned on there.
Mhm.
I don't know if it was the same kind of thing, but you seemed pretty intense when you mentioned that there, but you didn't want to talk about it. So
Yeah, that's the one. I've been hammering away at it for 5 years, and
wow,
to be honest, it's way more intense than the 9/11 one, and it's gonna poke a few holes in the system. The 9/11 one did, actually. So
that's it.
I think,
It's interesting. Like even with the Greek mythology one, it it's this it's the kind of thing that it could have very well just been an on purpose kind of creative decision that the team made. Like
mhm,
let's create this battle between the gods and have the whole scene set up here and not say
mhm,
anything about it. It'll just be one of the layers of this thing. Um, but the 9/11 one is either just like something that he's like reading off of or like picking up on as he's moving through the creative process, or
mhm.
he part of some weird group that controls the world and its outcome. Like it's either
Yeah.
one of those things. It's not something in the middle like the Greek thing, the Greek mythology thing. It was fascinating, and it's something that really it kind of blows me away, but it's also that could be a creative filter. It could be a
Mhm,
little layer that people love to do that with songs. People love to do that
mhm.
with a lot of things. And either way, it's pretty cool. It's pretty um, impressive. The interesting little details of things that you wouldn't have noticed unless you were looking for these correlations between these stories.
Mhm.
It kind of blows me away. Um,
Yep. Yeah, I like to say that whether it was intentional or not, it speaks to a lot of strange mysteries of the world, but it also speaks to the mystery of artistry and what it means to be an artist. I think we take for granted what it is to produce something in a medium like a canvas or a video or music. And we take for granted what it means to be an audience that connects with what this artist has created. And it's just so obvious in our life that we have artists and then we have audiences who appreciate the artist, but I don't really think we get down to appreciate the nitty gritty of what that is. And to me, when I see great art, what I see is a person who is able to condense, like a zip file, condense terabytes and terabytes of information down into a digestible packet so that an audience can sort of unzip it in like a little tiny 1 megabyte digestible package, and they could swallow it like a tab of acid, and they can get all those terabytes of information in their mind, in their body, in their nervous system without having to articulate it in words. They just get it. That's sort of like when you're a kid and you hear a song that you fall in love with, you don't even know what it's about. You just get it somehow. And then 10 years later, you figure out the lyrics and you're like,
Yeah.
whoa, like that's why I loved this song. That's why I fell in love with it. And it's like what it means to be an artist is to pack that information down. And some artists, they can take a terabyte of information, some can take 10 terabytes, but some can take the entire underlying narrative of the universe and condense all of the symbology of that narrative down into a little tab of acid for you that you can experience in a 5 minute song or a 1 hour Hollywood movie. And that is magic. And that's why it endures so much. And that's why when we look at these works of great art, there's no end to how much we can unpack the information. We can almost take a snapshot of any individual frame of it and just unpack, because the artist has condensed so much symbolic information into it. So again, whether that's intentional or not intentional, it just speaks to how brilliant artistry is.
Yes,
And the fact that human beings get to participate in that process is like as close to godliness as I could imagine, to be able to condense all the information of the universe down like that. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, no, I agree. And magic is the way to put it. That's, a good artist, whether it be a songwriter or a cook, a good artist creates magic in that way. They really do.
Mhm.
They put you in a place that you either wouldn't be able to attain otherwise, or you just didn't realize was even like you didn't realize it was you were able to have this emotion or this revelation just by sitting on your couch or at your dinner table. Like, I mean, I don't know how you feel about food as an art, but I personally look at it as just as much of an art as painting or singing or anything. Um, and food can do that to you as well, just as much as a movie can. It can make you go, "Oh, wait a minute, what this that what I don't know how I didn't notice this little crevice of emotion that I never go into, but here I am." And I mean,
Mm.
it's funny you mentioned how some artists condense uh, an instance or a story or some uh, grouping of information in a way, but some artists are able to condense the entire existence of what we know as reality into one 2-hour project. uh, I feel like a good a good artist, like a good movie maker, can do that with any kind of story, any kind of like who's really good at that is the Coen brothers, in my opinion. They
Mm.
either a serious story or an outrageous story and tell you as much as you could need to know about the human experience as anybody. Whether they're talking about you know a criminal trying to get by in life, or a story like the No Country for Old Men, where it's just like it's literally just a very simple story, but they tell you everything about the human experience in that movie. They tell you about every little aspect, and they also make you laugh at the same time, which is part of it. They make you scared, they make you laugh, and everything in between.
Mhm.
Which really well as well. He's I feel
Well,
like I'm
yeah,
getting
part part of
What
what
do
we
you?
do in synchromysticism is we have this appreciation for layered narratives.
Right.
So when we look at a movie, we say, what's the narrative underneath the narrative? And what's the narrative under that? And then what's the one under that? And
Mm,
then the one under that. And they're all as valid as the others. And we don't take any of them too seriously, but also we don't discredit any of them. And that's
mm,
sort of where synchromysticism becomes a game of playing, sort of saying, we're sort of massaging reality. We're massaging narratives, and we're not committed to saying, this story is trying to tell us this or trying to tell us that. And it's really fun. That's one of my most enjoyable things about being in sync is the open-mindedness and the process of it. Because, people will propose the subcontextual narrative of a movie, and then you
mm,
play with that subcontextual narrative and try to find new evidence for why it's valid, like, oh, this symbol system supports that subcontextual narrative, and oh, look, it turns out this character jumps from a helicopter and that supports it as well. And then you might find some things that discredit it, but in the end it's just a game of trying to think differently. That sort of circles back to what we said to earlier, which is that we're trying to think a little bit differently, jumping into this sync spiral where we spiral up. And it's a game. It's, like we said, it's intense and it's dead serious, but we don't take it too seriously in the synchromysticism community. We play with it, and it's so much fun. And when I get to interact with people about my Back to the Future 9/11 videos, there's sort of three camps. There's one camp that dismisses it as nonsense. There's one camp that takes it super seriously. But my favorite camp are the ones who understand that it's a game and that we're here to laugh primarily. We're here to laugh at how ridiculous the whole thing is, and not the movie, the whole thing. I mean reality. Like, we're here
yeah.
to laugh at it and play and say, oh, there's like five narratives going on here. Let's find the systems. It's really, really fun.
And just like any game, uh, I'm sure it is beneficial to not take it too seriously and or not take it too jokingly. Not, if you look at it as just uh, a pure nonsense activity that's just there to have fun, you're not going to do as well as your counterpart who's taking it completely seriously. But that right, right in the middle of that, I'm sure that is the perfect spot to be. Again, just like in any game, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
video game or sports, if you're too stiff about it, if you're too intense on something, you're gonna miss certain things. You gotta laugh at literally at everything. You gotta see that. That's a game is an interesting way to put it. That's it's kind of I never thought about it like that, but that's a good way. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, it's a good reflection of how I've come to decide I need to approach all endeavors, which is with that intense degree of dead seriousness, completely balanced by a desire for the whole thing to lead me to a place where I can laugh.
Yeah.
And I think synchromysticism is a good place to do that because it's so jarring when you first get into it. It's such a a mind warp
Yeah,
that
it's
you kind of want to go into this conspiracy draw board, like putting thumbtacks on a cork board and drawing lines and saying the Illuminati is real and the world's going to end,
sure,
because it's so jarring. But
sure.
the healthy progression of that is you sort of go through this synchromysticism adolescence, and it leads you to a place where you can laugh about the whole thing and enjoy it. So
It's a weird thing because I mean personally I never when I first discovered this world, I didn't even realize that it was an actual community. I didn't realize that there was more to it than the few videos I found just quickly. Somebody had sent me, I think the first one they sent me was the 9/11 one, the
mm-hmm.
finished, or not finished, the second version. And just he just sent it to me because we were into conspiracies. We were into, uh, you know, weird proof of the world we were living in, making just a little more sense than anybody could get credit for. We liked little things, like little, even if it was just coincidence stuff. But he showed me this video and he was like, "Hey, man, this is basically the real deal version of what we like to look for. We like people who think they're telling us something fascinating, and like some Bigfoot people are like that, where they completely believe to a point where you can listen to them and you're not necessarily entertained by who they are. You're entertained by the fact that they're legitimate in what they're saying. They're not fooled by something. They believe this from a natural standpoint. For some reason, a lot of flat earthers are like that as well. I guess they get enough information and they completely. It's wild to see somebody who's in complete belief. So when he showed me this video, like, this guy, whoever he is, either is really good at pretending or believes this enough that he made a real point with this very entertaining video. And I was like, all right, it sounds like you care about it, and we only refer each other stuff that we know the other person's going to appreciate. But it blew my mind in a way that I was mostly intimidated by the what's the word? I can't think of the word I'm trying to. What it seemed to mean about everything else in my life kind of freaked me out and kind of intimidated me, and took me literally years to delve into. 2 or 3 years until I delved into the fact that this was an actual whole community of people, and that there was more. Because I don't even know how, from what I've observed and what I've gotten into, I don't know how much of a. I don't know how, like, I'm mostly an outside observer of the sync community. I'm not really somebody who focuses on it enough to even call myself a member of that world. But it's so fascinating. Every time I get into something, it's so fascinating that I can't help but wonder if I should even, like, I don't know, but it's kind of, I don't know. It's weird. It's intimidating in a weird way. It's almost like I don't trust myself. It's like I'm sitting next to a big bag of heroin. I've never tried it before, and if what people say is true, it's going to make me feel better than I feel right now. So, but I have a whole bag of it next to me. Do I really need to start doing it? It's like that.
Yeah, it's potent. I tell people that the synchromysticism community were the kings of content before social media and YouTube, because we were exposing the benefits of long form internet media before anybody else had tapped into it. This was 10, 15 years ago. And the amount of sync content that exists is really, it's like 1,000 bags of heroin. There's so much out there and so many talented people within the community.
Yeah.
And part of the advantage that we sort of got was that we tapped into long form way before YouTube did and before podcasts did. I think people now are starting to understand the power of long form. And just to clarify that, it's that shift from mainstream news media that was sound bites and 2-minute snippets as it evolved into, Joe Rogan 3-hour podcasts, or, your 2-hour long favorite YouTube personality who you'll just sit and listen to at length.
Sure.
That sort of long form dynamic, it changes the way that you are able to think and interact with a community, and it creates a process. That's the important thing, is it creates like an intellectual game where you and your tribe sit in a circle and partake in a process of discovery, as opposed to sitting and listening to some talking head on TV tell you what's right and what's wrong over the course of 30 seconds. And then he moves on to the next segment. So when we were able to sit in this circle of our tribe and participate in long form for 3 hours of conversation while recording it, producing media, putting it on the internet. And we were doing this every other day for 10 years. And YouTube started to catch on in the last, 5 years or so. But it's because of this that I believe that what synchromysticism has ended up producing is, I think, one of the most rewarding endeavors I've ever done in my life. And it's definitely not the only thing I've done in my life. I mean, I have a career that's very rewarding. I've done other things, but synchromysticism is different. like you said, it's like you're sitting next to this bag full of heroin. It's potent, man, really potent. And there's so many talented people in this community producing videos, podcasts, blogs, books. It's the product of what long form does to transform the human mind. It's really been an amazing thing for me to be a part of.
I believe that, and like you just said, the fact that you're, this could be a pretty big, it could be a pretty big deal to get involved with something like that if you had nothing else going on in your life. It could be a life-changing event. It really could. And because of that, you could get really into it, and you can make content that is not only eye-opening but entertaining. Like I think your content, the fact that it's insightful and the fact that it's eye-opening is pretty cool. You made them entertaining. You made most of what you're watching a ride, as opposed to just like an information bucket being poured on your head. That's I give you credit for that. And to reach that level, some people would think that you would have to have, that would be your thing. That's your whole life right there. That's all. But somebody like you can do it, and you have not just a career, but you're in a career that, what's the fucking percentage of people who end up being professional athletes? It's got to be drastically low,
Yep.
And I don't know how much you enjoy it, but you enjoy it enough to be doing it for how long? You've been playing? 10 years?
This is my 13th year. Yeah.
Sorry?
This is my 13th year.
13th. Okay. So that, you're not just good at it, you're enjoying it enough to do it, like you're one aspect at least, and it doesn't even matter. Like you're enjoying something and you're good at it. So it's not like you're even locked into something that you're just happen to be lucky to have this, your dad owned a company and now you're the CEO. It's not even something like that. You're doing something that takes up, it takes, that, good for you, man. It's I try to tell somebody about something like the Stargate of Oz, and just telling them about it is too much for most of the people I'll try to because I'll come at them from a very specific point. I'll say, look, how I like conspiracy theories, and I like how interconnected everything is, and most of what I talk about is just silly coincidence stuff that makes it look like either we're in a simulation or something like that. I just like to make fun of that stuff. You know how I do that? Well, I found something that I can't make fun of, and I can't I can't even explain it to you in full, because it's so detailed and so exact and so you can't argue with most of the stuff in, especially the Stargate of Oz one. You can't argue it, or the 9/11 one. You can't argue with the connection. Some of them you can have a little bit of a theory on why it happened or how it happened, but the amount of stuff compared to how legitimate your points are, it's just when I'm about to show somebody one of them, especially the 9/11 one, because it's so I don't know, it's actually something I wanted to ask you about. It's so much like just a typical conspiracy theory, especially the 9 minute, that most people, when I tell them about it, they're like, "Oh, great! I can't wait to watch that."
Yeah.
Really can't wait to see how stupid it is. And
Yep.
within the first 2 minutes of that video, they're like, "What are you showing me?" Like, but this isn't a conspiracy video. This is a connection that somebody noticed, and it freaks them out. They don't want to trust how real everything else is. And it's funny because almost everything I show my friends, they're like waiting for it to be stupid. They're like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
this is silly, but why did you show it to me? What is the guy who's is the guy going to show up and he's got like a turkey on his head or something? Like, is the guy just insane? Well, what I wanted to ask you about was, was there something that you did? You talked about this briefly in the podcast, the 42-minute podcast, but was there something in the creation of that final product, the 9/11, Back to the Future, the final product, the second one?
Mm-hmm.
Something in the creation that was supposed to seem conspiratorial? Like, was there something in there? I forget what you said about it.
Do you mean in the tone or something explicit that I wrote?
It seems more like a typical conspiracy, like your repetitive. You repeat a couple things like seemingly one too many times because of the rhythm of it. Like it automatically seems like a conspiracy, a typical conspiracy video where
Mm-hmm.
there's one part where you are connecting the pines and the towers, and you just repeat pines, towers, pines, and you do it like 3 times, and it just, I don't know, there was something about it. Like, I turned to my friend, I was like, do you think he was poking fun at conspiracy videos? Like, you think I was wondering if you had done that on purpose.
Well, I wanted there to be an overt, obvious feeling that the movie was exercising itself upon you,
Okay.
that the medium itself was flexing on you. And I wrote that explicitly in a disclaimer at the beginning, where I said that be careful because there's no message here that's divisible from this medium. And that's more of what the message of that piece is than the actual conspiracy that it's trying to unravel. Back to the Future 9/11, the reason that I made it and the reason I felt it was so important was that it's a discussion about the relationship between your mind and video media, and how it's the cutting room floor that ultimately determines your perception.
Right.
That's why the third act of that video is all about how the power of media is now in the hands of the people via their cell phones. The ability to cut media is now in our power. And I wanted that to be reflected in the piece that you're watching at this very moment, which is to say, look, I've cut this up in a way. I've narrated it in a way. I have glossed and combed over every single word that I say in the exact pace that it needs to be said. I've hypnotically repeated specific parts of it, pines, towers, in an effort to reach out and grab your perception and pigeonhole it, directed in a way that I want to be in control of.
Yeah.
And the whole point of this is that the medium destroys the message that carries it. That's the final line of the movie. And that's the message that it has to tell us about Back to the Future. Because what I'm saying is that, I'm sorry, about 9/11, because what I'm saying is that no human event on planet Earth has ever been witnessed by more people at one time than 9/11. We all watched our TVs. And the idea is that we were never watching 9/11. We were watching the narrative about it. And the narrative, when you watch it on TV, exists on the cutting room floor and nowhere else. And for people to wake up to that fact, I believe, is what the true 9/11 Stargate is. It's that we've been in this trance of people repeating in a hypnotic rhythm things that they want us to believe, of people going into the cutting room floor and in a very sometimes nefarious, but certainly premeditated way, deciding what they want us to think and getting away with it. And the beauty of Back to the Future Predicts 9/11 is that I went into the cutting room floor with the most absurdly ridiculous idea, which is that this 80s sci-fi movie predicted this terrorist attack.
Yeah.
And ultimately, when we walk away after watching it, a lot of people are convinced that what I'm saying is real. A lot. To the point where they say, this is objectively undeniable. And the whole point of the movie is not that this is objectively undeniable. The point is, me on the cutting room floor is dangerous because I'm in control of your perception. And to me, that's what the 9/11 Stargate is to free people from the grip of the television. That's it.
That's, you know, that's beautiful, because that's it is basically what I thought happened did happen, but for a much better reason. But for a much better, like, what you're trying to show isn't the hypocrisy in how, you know, breathtaking a conspiracy video could be, even though it's nonsense. What you're showing is that you're actually being you. It's hypnotizing is the thing that you're spotlighting, not the fact that, wow, I'm glad I asked you about that, because that is so much, it's much more of a relief than you just being somebody who's like, I'm just going to poke fun at this medium, because that's cool and all, that's fun, but what you did seemed intentional, and I'm glad that it was something that you had actually put energy in, because as opposed to just turning out like that, like it happened to seem like that. I don't know what that means, but it's just, in my head, it's so much more of a relief that you did that on purpose. And something I can never convince anybody who, except for my one friend, the one that showed it to me. Anybody else that I talk to about that video in particular, I can't convince them of what you were just talking about, the actual point of that video. I can't convince them that it's about that. Nobody will believe that because of its implication, of its kind of just scary truth to it. You know, that what they want it to be is, oh, this crazy guy saw a couple connections between these events and wants to believe that Robert Zemeckis is the Illuminati. That's what the movie's about. That's the whole thing is. There's nothing in there about that whole thing at the end. That's just to distract you from what the video is actually about. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, why? I mean, do you want to watch it again? Like, or do you just not want to believe that this could be the truth? And that's what me and my friend talk about now, about how not only would it be wild if he was just, you know, again, an Illuminati figure, like this group of elite, supremely smart individuals, just, you know, making a movie to literally do nothing, because it's not like they. If he was doing that, he would have made it known that was it, or let somebody, quote unquote, leak that that's what it was about. But that's never happened. So the whole idea of him being part of an elitist group is kind of silly. It doesn't make any sense unless you want to believe that they're doing it in a way that you were just talking about, where they're kind of like pushing it in your face, like this is how things are. But again, that just sounds too easy. It seems much more likely that this guy is just an artist. He's trying to interpret the world, interpret something like an attack on your life, on your, you know, Marty's trying to save his family. He's trying to, from the beginning of the series, he's trying to exist, actually exist. And the world around him is literally trying to take him out of the picture. I think that it's much more likely that this guy's and his team were just good artists, and they were showing that something like 9/11 and its media frenzy that surrounded it can literally be that attacking force, that taking you away from, like you were saying, taking you out of putting you just in the viewer's seat and not in the creator's seat. You're not, you know, something like the news media doesn't let you have thoughts about it. That doesn't give you any time to have your own existence in the process of watching a half-hour news program is, it's basically maddening, You're told one thing before you can even think about what it means. You're seeing the weather, and then another tragedy is in front of you, and then you're seeing the sports numbers. And I really do. I think that's most likely what it was. Is a group of artists were interpreting the world around them, and that's what came out. Because, like you say, it's something that's basically always there. You're either tapping into it or noticing it or not. But it's always gonna, that's really. And again, thank you not only for taking your time to do this, but thank you for sharing your insights with the rest of us. Because I mean, I don't even know if I don't even know if I would have the if I did jump into something like that. I don't even know if I would have the ability to get to the level that you've attained. But I would hope I would be able to. I don't have no idea. But thank you for sharing it, because it could just be something you live in and you experience for yourself, or you show to your friends or something. But that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to anyone who enjoyed it, I guess you're welcome. To me, though, it was to a great degree personal therapy to address a slow personal descent into madness, which was opening up this synchromysticism mentality. I think making that video really helped put a cap on everything that I'd experienced, because it helped me share it with more people. And you opened this interview by saying, like, how did you get into this? And I said it's something that I've sort of felt my whole life. And I believe that the reason that people feel that thing that I said I felt has something to do with a lack of connection to people. And that's not a slant on anybody who should have been connected to me at the time. I think it's more that some people in this world require more connection or a specific type. And for that reason, they sort of live feeling alone. And I think that when you experience that for a very long time, you find it difficult to sort of orient and place yourself in the universe to the point where you develop this sense of non-local existence. And that is what I believe develops into this sense that you're in a void. I liken it to not being able to place yourself in space and time. And that's sort of that weird, eerie, goosebumpy feeling that you get at night when you think about conspiracies and you think, am I really here right now? Is anything really real? Does time work backwards? Where am I? I believe that thought is downstream from the feeling that you cannot place yourself in space and time, which I believe comes from a lack of people reflecting back to you that you exist, which again ties back to neglect or a lack of connection. So when you have this feeling that you don't exist, you develop this idea that you don't exist in space and time, and that bleeds into, well, nothing exists. There is nothing. And that, I believe, is an actual amazingly useful and pragmatic way to spring into, well, maybe it's not the case that nothing exists, but maybe things just aren't the way that we think they are. Maybe they don't exist the way that we think they do. And that has led me to this amazing game of synchromysticism that I get to play and swim in. And when we talked about tribes, I think everybody else in the synchromysticism tribe, and probably to a great degree the conspiratorial tribe, they feel this sense of not being able to place themselves in the universe. I don't know where I am in space and time. And that's why conspiracies feel so tantalizing to us. We love them. We're like, ooh, that just hits me in the right spot, because we felt that conspiracy our whole life. Like, I'm not here. I'm not now. I'm somewhere else. I'm some other time and place. Like, that's the ultimate conspiracy that we felt our whole lives. And that's why when we hear and watch stupid YouTube videos about stuff like the one I made, we're like, I feel this, man. It resonates with me. I love it. So, like I said, it was therapeutic for me, because I've made this because I felt alone. And the act of making it allowed me to connect with a broader tribe who said, I feel this way, and I see what you're saying, and I get it.
That's it. That's pretty. I mean, again, good for you for finding an outlet for it. I mean, it's kind of surprising to hear, but it's not. Now that more I'm thinking about it, it's not that surprising to hear. I mean, again, from my point of view, that's where a lot of art comes from. It comes from the person. It comes from need, it comes
Hmm.
from that need of either closure or that need of like, people who paint abstract paintings, especially. A lot of those people see that world all the time, and they need to, or like surrealist painters, they like need to put it on the paper so that other people can see that world too.
Hmm.
Um, and then they find a couple people in their town or their, whatever. They look at the painting differently and they go, "Oh, you see that too, huh? I guess I'm not completely insane." I don't, it's one of those things where you, that's it's wild because that need that you had to not, whatever the, or I say need, but that drive of trying to, place yourself somewhere and actually exist. That's a very typical thing in the art community in general. That's just,
Hmm.
I mean, the painter Salvador Dali, that guy.
Of course. Yeah.
I mean, he was one of those people who was not just that way in his art, but he was that way in life. He was like, "Well, fuck you. This is how I am. I'm gonna say what I'm saying because that's what's going through my head, not because that's what you want to hear."
Right.
And most people are scared to do that. So, you know, when I found out about this idea of synchronicity, it was kind of like a glimmer of hope in my mind, because the way I look at things, I've had to struggle for years and years. Up until that point, I struggled for years and years on, am I completely off my rocker, or am I just slightly off my rocker? Like, because I can't help but notice things like patterns, and the things I can't help but put things into metaphors that explain them more clearly. I can't help but do it, and that's why I like
Hmm.
art so much. But like I've told my friends for a long time, I looked at the years from 1960 to the 90s like a big party. Like in the 60s, some guys and girls got along at the park, and they're like, "Hey, let's do this at the house. Let's go have a party." And that was the 60s and 70s. People just realizing that they were having a good time together and going, "Okay, we could do this. We could do this forever, basically." And then that's where the end of the 70s comes around. The party is ending and people are going home, and a couple people stick around and just keep doing coke. And that's the 80s. People are just sitting around. It's kind of like the after party. There's like 5 people left, and they're like, "Well, we still got stuff to do here. Let's just keep doing it and just keep doing it." And then the 90s is the next morning, where people left. They have a couple kids now. They're all just sitting around on the couch. The parents are all burned out because they've just experienced the 80s. They had
Yeah.
some kids in the 80s, so now they have to be sitting there on the couch with their kids, and that's why 90s kids shows were so adult oriented, because the people making them knew all those burned out parents are sitting on the couch with them on Saturday morning, just not wanting to move. Like, all right, I'll watch Ren and Stimpy with you. Okay, it's better than whatever the fuck was on in the 80s for kids. Like, it's much better than that. I'll watch that. And
Mm.
I rode that train of describing those those years as a party for so long that I've developed the whole movie around it. Um,
Mm.
and it reminds me of what you said with the making the those videos kind of capped everything for you. I feel like I have a few projects that are, once completed, or gonna actually put my mind at ease in a way that I never thought was possible, until I put them into a palatable, form for other people to consume. Because describing it, like just now, I just went on a stupid rant about it. and didn't really describe it even. Like,
Well, let me ask you, if you could describe everything that you want to about this, how many hours would it take you to rant about it? 100, 500,
yeah,
like 1,000?
just, yeah, I mean, hundreds.
What I mean is that's why coming out with a piece of art is so therapeutic, because you have something to say that
Yeah.
takes 1,000 hours to say it, and the art allows you to put that in a zip drive and condense those terabytes of information into 30 minutes and give it to someone and be like, hey man, I've been wanting to sit with you for 1,000 hours and tell you all this. I know that's not possible, but here, put this tab of acid on your tongue and you'll get all the information that I wanted to tell you.
Well, and you said earlier that that's one of the abilities of a good artist is to be able to do that condensing. Um, and that's, I mean, that's why movies like, or stories like uh, Alice in Wonderland or The Matrix work so well, because they're literally some of the oldest stories ever told for a reason. The idea of somebody leaving home, having experiences, using those experiences to interpret their home when they get back home. That's so in our core. Uh, but I mean, it's easier to do in a 2-hour movie than it is to do in a 15-minute clip. Like you did that with two, if not more, of your videos. You condensed the idea very well. I mean, I don't mean to brown nose you or anything, but I was impressed at that, because in a movie form or in a book form, it's hard enough to do in a movie or book form where you have hours and hours to explain this idea
Mhm.
and describe it. What you did was powerfully inspiring in a lot of
Thank
ways.
you. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, man. That's because I knew right when the first time my friend sent me that video, the one video, I was like, this is something different. This is not. I'm not used to this. I'm not used to
Mhm.
this amount of information in this amount of time making so much sense. I'm not used to that. I'm used to
Mhm.
1 hours of information making a lot of sense, or just chunks of, scrapings of information not making any sense because they can't, because it's not enough time there. There's not enough mass to show the whole thing, but you did it. So
Mhm.
again, appreciate that as well. Um, you said that you might finish off the projects that you're working on once you're retired from basketball. Do you have like an idea of when you want to do that, or is that just like a general plan for the future?
I think my last season will be next year. So I would guess within 18 months, I'll probably end up finishing that last Back to the Future one.
Okay. Well, um, I mean, I'm sure you're making this decision for good reasons. But I hope that it works out the way you want it to. That's you said you've been playing for 13 years. I'm
Mhm.
can't imagine how much that strain that's put on you. So I hope it's an interesting retirement for you.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm in constant pain.
It's mental and physical stress. It's crazy. It's can't even imagine. That's
I do love it though.
I bet you do, man. I kick myself every time I play a sport that I loved as a kid and didn't follow through with it. I think about that way too much, where I'm like, 10 more years of this sport, I would have been my life. It would have been
Mm.
everything I do. And I don't know, maybe for me, maybe it's a good thing that I missed those. But I mean, you've been playing your whole life, you said.
Yeah.
That's a different kind of affection than I obviously ever had for any of the things that I played. Um,
Yeah. Well, like the video, my secret is obsession.
okay.
Um, I don't know if you could tell, I'm a little spectrumy, so I don't really do things. I just become obsessed with things. So 25 years of playing basketball
Yeah.
or hunkering down in a cave and making a sync video, it's all kind of the same sort of mental process of tunnel vision and obsession. So
Sure. I had I'm gonna we've been talking for about an hour, so I'm gonna let you go. But I had a couple notes written here. Just want to make sure I hit everything I wanted to. Um, oh no, the only other thing on here is one of the one of these one of these other things I noticed in those. So what does this say? Oh, I'm sorry. So when Lloyd abducts Marty at the end of the tunnel, with
mm-hmm.
he has the string of
Yeah.
the flag. It's a he's abducting him with a rainbow.
Yep.
And
Correct.
and puts his head in contact with he puts his head in contact with one of the colors on that rainbow, which is red, which is the color of the angle 42. Like that.
Ah, nice.
It was just, and again, it was one of those things where it might have, that one might have just been a coincidence, but it was something that I noticed right away. Because it was because you, in your other video, you had mentioned when he receives the pamphlet, the book, he's wearing a rainbow on his head.
Yep.
That, like fluorescent, whatever kind of hat. And I don't know, that was just one of those things.
Yeah, it's like the rainbow creating spectrum angle 42 is touching his head. It's symbolically the exact same thing as him wearing a rainbow hat.
Right.
So well done. Yeah.
But all right. So well, listen. Thank you so much for doing this. I really, I appreciate the work you do as an artist. I mean, I'm not into sports, so I don't know how you are at basketball, but thank you for not only being a creative person, but sharing that creativity with the world, because that's personally, as an artist and as a lover of art, I think it's necessary, not just important, but necessary. It's what keeps us alive. It's what keeps us wanting to live. And whether or not this place is real, whether or not this existence is as concrete as we want it to be, people like you make it a little more palatable. And we all, whether we say it or not, we appreciate that.
Oh, that's very gratifying to hear. I appreciate the compliment. And also, I just wanted to mention that you are refreshingly articulate when discussing these kind of topics. They're not always easy to unpack. So I know you said this is one. Yeah, no, you're not having a tough time in my mind. You're doing great. So
it's hard to understand, let alone describe. And it's something that it's why I liked your stuff so much, because it did such a good job of not just putting a sign in front of your face, but teaching you how to read the language on the sign. You could notice those things 100 times and not even be able to show them to somebody, let alone articulately, put them out there. I thank you for that compliment, because I honestly, I thought I was piecing shit together this whole time, but apparently I did a decent job. So thank you.
For sure, brother.
Yeah, and if you end up finishing those videos, are you gonna be putting them on your web? Your YouTube portal?
No, man, I'm going to have a few beta run throughs like I always do with sync people, and I'm going to add you to the list. So you and I are going to talk about them before I put them out.
That sounds awesome. And if I don't know what kind of what kind of restraint you had on time, but thank you for taking some time in the, where you said it's the middle of the night there. Thank you so much.
Anytime, my guy. I had a real great time with you.
Yeah, I had a good time speaking with you, man. Good luck with the rest of your career, man. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks, Philip. Let's be in touch, man.